It's Friday the 13th, and you're watching FreightWaves Now. I'm your host, Anthony Smith, and coming up, Andrew Cox is going to give us a DHL Supply Chain Pricing Power Index update. But first,
Hey everyone, and welcome to your carrier update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Zach Strickland, and today we're watching our tender rejection index, 26.32%. We started off the week really hot. Last week, tender rejection rates, I mentioned on Monday, jumped up over 27%, close to 27.5%, one of the all-time high recordings. Now, we thought that this might be the start of peak season, and it probably is still kind of that early, settling in of people kind of getting in position for peak season, but it is starting to slide back down again, not significantly, but again, towards the end of the month, we should see these tender rejection rates really start to pick back up again as that supply side starts to contract a little bit. Carriers, obviously, and more of a boundary trying to get home time around Thanksgiving and Christmas. So looking at the country, you can see our weighted rejection index here. A lot of red on this map because a lot of the weighted rejection index values did start to come down. We do have Joplin, Missouri showing up with a strong reading of 5.1. Again, combining the volumes with the weekly change in tender rejection rate. This is a very near-term index. If you're looking for something that's going to tell you what are the most significant changes over the last 7 days, this is the index you want to look at because it does combine volume with tender rejection rates over the last 7 days. Joplin, Missouri, strong increase there in the weighted rejection index, driven by a lot of that tender rejection rate increase right there in the middle of the country. The middle of the country tends to be one of the more unstable sections of the country. When a lot of freight starts moving out of Ontario and Southern California down there over in the northeastern corridor, this area of the country tends to get neglected by carriers. Chicago and Dallas also drive a lot of that capacity into those markets. Kansas City, Joplin, some of the more rural markets in the United States tend to get ignored there for a little bit. But if you look on the map, you're going to see that dark red down there, Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas showing a negative 9.4 on the weighted rejection index. So this is a significant drop. Anything over or under negative 5, over positive 5, we consider to be a pretty strong WRI reading. Houston, Texas really dropping off, and we're going to dive into that here in just a minute. But other parts of the country, you see Ontario, Los Angeles coming down week over week. I'll show you that's not necessarily something to be too alarmed about just yet. It just means that things have settled back from last week in those markets. Salt Lake City, Denver, and then of course up in the northeastern corridor, weighted rejection index starting to come down a little bit more there. Breaking out Houston and Ontario on the outbound tender rejection index. So you can see Ontario there in the green line. Ontario's rejection rate has come down, but it's not below where it was to end the month of October. So it's just settling back down from where it was. So rejection rate's still relatively high at 23.36%. Houston, however, though, you can see that it is starting to look like it's moving below that moving average, that it does have a little bit more weight to its drop at a 13.89% down there. But it's dropping below, you can see about there around in the middle of September when rejection rates fell below this point, we really haven't come back down to this level in a while. End of October, or middle of October, I should say, we saw some rejection rates start to middle around this range, but right now we are, looking like we might actually break through that boundary. The trend is not strong for Houston. So if you are looking for spot market activity, Houston's probably not the strongest market of some of the larger markets in the United States to enter into. Average length of haul in Houston, about 420 miles or so. Very short haul market in general because it is a regional market. It does go into Dallas, New Orleans, Little Rock, San Antonio, etc. Some of the reasons for, to be a little bit concerned about looking into the future for the Los Angeles market. We saw the tender rejection rate come down. Outbound tender volume index, however, staying relatively high. Volumes are staying relatively flat as we move into the the peak season here. Volumes staying relatively high though, and that is disconnecting from the imports. So we're looking at import volumes starting to trend back down, and the volume's staying flat right now. And so that means that Los Angeles is definitely going to be a market to watch here in the future. And that'll do it for today's Carrier Update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
welcome to the DHL Supply Chain Pricing Power Index update. I'm here with Andrew Cox. Andrew, what's the latest?
Well, Anthony, the Passport research team and I had written over the previous couple weeks that we thought the first 10 days or the first 2 weeks of November would act as a bellwether for what we thought the entire holiday season would look like. So we thought if we saw a leg up in rejections and a leg up in tender volumes, that we would expect the holiday season to be pretty strong, and that's what we've seen over the past couple weeks. So over this past week, we saw both the contract market and our OTVI index jump up about 4%, and we also saw 70 out of the 100 spot market volume lanes jump up. So we kept the pricing power index at 80 this week. Carriers are in a fantastic position. They are reigning supreme, but that's not to say that they can't go any higher over the next couple weeks. I am expecting another leg up in the pricing power index, moving towards those holidays around Thanksgiving and on Christmas. Volumes are going to continue to come up, and we're going to see carriers even more selective as they try to get closer to home.
So you mentioned a lot of momentum potentially left for carriers in the next few months here. Thanksgiving, Christmas, are you looking at Black Friday deals throughout the month and like a lot of consumer goods?
Definitely. I mean, Amazon started off the early holiday shopping with that mid-October Prime Day, and we've seen volumes. I mean, we had seen volumes basically flatline at a very elevated rate since Labor Day. Like I said, this past week we did see another leg up in tender volumes, up 4% week over week. We're seeing surging import volumes. We still have low inventory to sales ratios, so we're going to have some replenishment happening here in the fourth quarter and into Q1. So on the volume side, things are pretty strong. We have consumer demand still up. I think the latest week that just came out yesterday from the Bank of America consumer spending data, total card spending was up 7% year over year for the last week of data we have, which is really strong given the overall economic backdrop. We still have 7 million Americans on unemployment insurance. Given that overall backdrop, consumer spending has been really strong.
And what's this doing for rates overall?
Yeah, so we'll get to rates in 1 second. I'll pop over just show you the truckstop.com spot rate volume. So as I said, a lot of green on this chart. You saw a leg up in spot volumes. Over 70% of the lanes were green this week. And then onto capacity before we touch on rates here. So we've, again, as Zach said, we saw tender rejections decline marginally this week. It's not so much of a big deal, really, because they hit an all-time high before that decline. And really, I don't think that the tender rejections need to stay this high or push higher to have upward pressure on the spot market. I think the spot market can stay tight even with tender rejections north of 10 or 15. So the only thing to note here is that this extraordinarily high tender rejection rate indicates to me that shippers may be losing grasp of capacity to the carriers.
Gotcha. And so a lot of action going on, a lot of activity. And is this something that you really saw happening coming into the third quarter or out of the third quarter?
Yeah, I mean, we've expected this coming through. So, moving on to the rates, where the capacity, the tender rejections leg up has accompanied a rise in spot rates as well. Spot rates are now just a hair under $3 a mile on a national level. They're up 17% year over year, which is down slightly from last week. They were up 21%. Of course, you can see that they're facing some tougher comps headed into the holiday season. We typically see that 20-25% rate increase on the spot market into the holiday season. So we've got tougher comps, but in any case, I still expect spot rates to take another leg up from here. All signs of capacity is that it's still very tight and that demand is still strong. So I could expect to see spot rates still in the low to mid double-digit range up year over year.
Got it. Excellent. So awesome information as always. I heard there's some new community stuff going on. Care to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So we started these 3 new communities here at FreightWaves. So we've got a lot of tailored content focused on certain communities. I'm leading the retail community. The first iteration of that community is a bi-weekly newsletter called Point of Sale. You can go to freightwaves.com/communities to sign up for Point of Sale or for the CPG or automotive newsletters. Those are also available. So go in there and check them out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All right,
and thank you so much for tuning in. That's going to do it for this DHL Supply Chain Pricing Power Index update. Be sure to tune in next week for all the latest. That's going to do it for this Friday, the 13th edition of FreightWaves Now. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you can check out all of our streaming apps on your favorite streaming platforms. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.